and thanks for joining us today. My name's Geoff Stedman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for SDVI, and I'm looking forward to my conversation in a few minutes. Let me start, though, with a little preamble about media supply chains, because we all know they're some of the most complex workflows in existence. Think about what it takes to take a single piece of content, whether that's a new season, a major series, a new episodic, and get that all the way from ingest to finished and packaged and delivered to streaming, broadcast, and every other platform in the world. Hundreds of steps, thousands of assets, dozens of vendors. The platform that many of the world's largest media companies trust to orchestrate all of this is called Rally from SDVI. And today I'm sitting down with Chris Braehler, SDVI's Chief Product Officer, to talk about the significant evolution of Rally and how and why that matters right now. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Geoff. I'm happy to be here.
So you're our Chief Product Officer, and you've been close to Rally's development for a long time. Why don't we start by having you just tell folks a little bit about who you are and your role?
Yeah, I'm the Chief Product Officer at SDVI. I've been with the company for 10 years. So like you said, I've been part of the Rally journey for a long time. And in my role, I'm responsible for the strategic direction and execution of that direction, including the roadmap and everything that goes around that.
Cool. So before we get into what's new, let's set some context. For someone watching who hasn't heard of Rally before, what does it do and what problem does it solve?
So Rally is a media supply chain management platform. So what it means, it essentially connects and orchestrates all the pieces that make up the media supply chain within our customers' facilities and helps them orchestrate and automate their workflows and their supply chains and their tasks and their actions. But it doesn't just orchestrate the applications that are needed within that supply chain. It also orchestrates the infrastructure needed for those. So if any job needs any specific infrastructure, Rally automatically in the background, completely transparent to the users, spins up infrastructure needed and spins them down. And on top of this, it's not just orchestrating and improving the automation within the supply chain. It also has a whole bunch of tools to integrate manual work that people are doing within those supply chains into the automation and making those things more efficient as well. So essentially our customers use it to streamline and automate their whole processes internally that get media in the front door, everything that needs to happen in between until it leaves again for linear playout or VOD distribution or content sales, anything in between essentially.
So orchestration, resource management, human in the loop when needed. Sounds like this isn't really a niche product. I guess who does Rally support today?
So we have a broad range of customers in the M&E space. So it is media supply chain management. So our core audience is obviously media and entertainment. We've been very fortunate that a lot of very big M&E companies have chosen Rally over the last 10 years to automate and operate their supply chains in the US and in Europe. From content owners to distribution partners to production. We have some of the film studios within our portfolio as well. So essentially, if you deal with media and more precisely with file-based media and with mastering of content in any step within the end-to-end supply chain, you have needs to automate this and make this more efficient. So those are our customers from very, very big to also small. Yeah.
Great. So let's pivot a little bit. As you just said, Rally's a proven product. We have major media companies in the world relying on it. So let's start with the question then, why change? What made this reinvention necessary when we think about introducing a next generation Rally?
It's essentially working with our customers and being essentially a usage-based system. You see a lot of patterns and how it's been used over those years. made us realize that the supply chains within our customers are ever changing. So they're constantly evolving, they're constantly adding functionality, they're starting to branch out to new markets geographically. There's obviously a lot of M&A activity within our customers as well, which means they need to collapse different supply chains into a single one, or then perhaps branch them out again after that. So essentially, our customers are constantly building supply chains. So while Rally is a very, very powerful tool, the building of the supply chain in some of those cases can take a little bit longer than people would like. And if you start on that journey, then spending like a couple of weeks on building your workflow and your supply chain is totally fine because you're running it for years after. But if you then constantly need to evolve this, essentially any day we can cut off by building those supply chains, by either making it quicker or by expanding the amount of people that can actually build supply chains and build workflows and automate things within an organization is great for the customer. So essentially, we just see that with all the changes that are happening, and obviously AI is just one new puzzle in that piece in that puzzle. That just means our customers need to adapt quicker and quicker and quicker, even than they've done a month ago, let alone years ago. So we want to be able to address that and make it quicker and more efficient to also change the supply chains that our customers are running. So essentially, that's where we looked at this and see how can we make this quicker, and then on top of this, how can we also be ready and to do this within the concept of an agentic environment on top of this. Because some of our customers are moving to the next step and saying, like, I don't want humans anymore making these changes into the supply chains. I actually want to make agents build my supply chains on the fly whenever something is needed. So essentially, we just wanted to be ready for this, which is why a couple of years back, we embarked on this mission to essentially create an additional orchestration layer within the Rally platform.
Yeah, so when we think about NextGen Rally, internally, when we talk about it, we kind of have three themes that keep coming up: speed, simplicity, and AI readiness. Would you say that's the right frame?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's in all of this, the speed and the simplicity go a little bit hand in hand, but building to a declarative supply chain system makes it so that you don't have to tell the system anymore really how it needs to do something. You tell it what you want it to do. And that's inherently quicker because you know what you want to do, but then you move essentially backwards and say, like, okay, how can I get to that end goal? How can I get this format and this metadata and all of this to this destination? And then you work backwards from there and figure out the sequence of steps. So if you can essentially stop at when you know what you want to do and essentially just tell the system what you want to do, you get quicker to that solution at the end. And essentially that makes it quicker, and within that also simpler. So we separated the control plane for the data plane. So what the supply chain does, which is the control plane, to where it's executed, which is the data plane, which also makes it simpler to build and simpler to essentially think about that from an operational point of view. So that way you have a broader set of employees within our customers that are all of a sudden that are capable and having access to actually configuring and building supply chains themselves, often building on top of what the more, let's say, techie teams have built. Because inherently, a supply chain, you can't just take all the simplicity out of this. The people that we will be watching will know, like, oh, I have so many specific things that my supply chain needs to do. It needs to talk to these systems and that system, which is internal systems. How can SDVI, like, out of the box, be able to talk to my homegrown scheduling system? We can't. We don't know what it is. So our customers still need the ability to do that themselves. But essentially, by encapsulating these things and broadening the access to the tool itself of getting data out of the system, you make it broadly accessible and with this simpler to use. And then when you have all of these building blocks and they're tested and vetted and you have deterministic output of them, you know when I run this little piece that gets the data out of there, it always gets the data out of there the same way, the way I tested and validated it, then you can let agents loose on that as well. If you then have an agent in your environment saying like, hey, I need data out of the system, it can just run that part of the supply chain completely autonomously because you vetted that part is right. So essentially that's how we taken these three concepts and applied them to our new outcome-based declarative supply chain design.
Wow, excellent! Lot of great innovations under the covers. There's also a new graphical supply chain builder. So how does that change the process of actually building a supply chain day to day for operators or for engineering?
Yeah, so that goes into that part I was mentioning earlier with the simplicity. So imagine you have something very, very specific that you need to talk to a specific tool, which you can't really do well graphically or very hard graphically. The tool and Rally already has been able to do this, but so the new gen can still do this. And then you have people within the organization, like the DevOpsy kind of people, build a connection into this and test them and validate them. But then they become well-defined function blocks within the organization and within the Rally system. And now having a graphical supply chain designer being able to essentially grab those building blocks that you have built and validated, put them on a canvas and connect them to other things, all of a sudden enables a lot less technical folks to build a supply chain and automate things that up until now within those organizations was not automated because it simply didn't rise up high enough in importance to have those very busy people build these connections out themselves. But now an operations department that needs to be able to automate something but never was important enough because it doesn't run enough content out of it, all of a sudden can just grab these building blocks that are well vetted by the tech team, connect them together, and all of a sudden deliver a promo to a remote office in the APAC region, which they only do every 2 weeks and do 10 of them. So it's not, it was never automated before, but it's automatable now. So I always call it like democratizing access to supply chain design, have more people to build, be able to build your supply chain. And then on top of this, having this graphical supply chain builder, we then have a reference to what the supply chain can do and what all the branches and graphs are for this. And so we can show that same view in monitoring as well. So if the operations department built that supply chain themselves, they can also monitor them because they have moved these building blocks in. They inherently kind of understand what the sequence there is and can monitor themselves, which also reduces the load on, once again, those second tier support and DevOps people when it comes to supporting the system internally as well. And again, this is all declarative supply chain design, so people don't really need to worry about what the sequence is. I can essentially say like, I need a subtitle file and I need a video file, and then the graph essentially builds itself out of what each step needs and what it produces.
Yeah, definitely lowering the barrier of entry to getting supply chains. A part of this, though, I think is called supply chains functions.
Mm-hmm.
What are those?
So that's what we call these little building blocks within the supply chain. So what you essentially drag on the canvas or in that declarative structured text file that makes up the supply chain in the back end, which the agents can write automatically as well, because that's what we actually store. The graphical is just a representation of that. That what you drag in there is a supply chain function. So we will ship the product with a bunch of supply chain functions out of the box for transcoding, any kind of transcoding, proxy transcoding, audio normalization, caption conversions, QC, manual QC, steps within the supply chain that every one of our customers does. And then they can configure them and customize them to their needs in the graphical user interface again, or in that structured text file, whatever you like better. And again, in an AI case, it's definitely the structured text file. But then on top of this, our customers, like I alluded before, can build their own supply chain functions. So when they need to connect to their own contract management system that they have, or their own rights management system to within the supply chain, check the rights. So they can essentially build their own supply chain function in the system itself that goes out to the right rights management system and then specify, okay, this needs an asset ID, and it gives you back a has rights, yes or no. So asset ID plus region plus platform gives out yes or no. And then anyone that builds a supply chain doesn't need to know how rights work or how the rights management system works. They just drag it in and say, okay, this is my asset. This is the platform that I'm going to VOD. This is the region that I'm going to Europe. Is it in rights? Yes, no. And then the supply chain will do the right thing afterwards. So that's kind of like the idea of supply chain functions, collapsing functionality within the supply chain into nice bite-sized chunks that are well-defined, that anyone can use, once again, an operator, but also an AI agent. Because if it's well-defined, the AI agent also knows within a supply chain, it might be building on the fly to send something to Europe that it needs to check for rights. So we'll check the supply chain library function, sees the specification of this, and is able to drop it in itself automatically.
Wow, very, very interesting. And I suppose customers will be able to share those functions if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's up for them to decide. We obviously share ours freely and openly with everyone. But if then customer want to share their functions with others, they absolutely can. Yes.
That's very cool. Very good way to make it portable and repeatable. Hey,
Yes.
there's another capability that I want to make sure we spend a moment on because I do think it's pretty unique in the market, and that's something called supply chain rewind. Can you talk about that for a sec?
So yeah, we have a concept within the NextGen platform that a supply chain takes essentially its specification, its structured text, YAML description when it starts running. This has a lot of benefits even outside of rewind because you can start changing supply chains in a running system to do a new version and have old versions continue to run. It has a lot of inherent benefits. But one of the big benefits of this is what we call rewind. So because you have a supply chain in it has its definition. This definition, while when it starts, is shared with everything else that was started at the same time. But when it runs, it's its own instance. That means I can change that definition and can change whatever would happen to supply chain without impacting anything else that runs into the system. So what that essentially means is I can see a supply chain, and let's say you have a supply chain that runs and it reaches out to the rights management system in the middle to be able to be sent to Europe. And the rights management system says it's not in rights because someone forgot to update it or the update is due tomorrow. But you also want it to be on the platform tomorrow. So you have a very short window here. So you need to press this asset through. It's urgent. I mean, everyone's listening has this in the operations. You have this super urgent asset. It needs to be pressed through and it doesn't quite fit the overall supply chain design for every other asset. So how about you take a little timeline marker that shows you what happened in the supply chain. You grab it, move it back to the step where the rights management was asked and just change whatever it returned. Instead of it saying no, you change it to yes and say like, restart from here. And then all these steps that worked before are totally fine. And then everything that happened afterwards, we will run. And again, we rewind. So any step that happened in there, we undo, if possible, that step as well. And so the supply chain will just finish. That content will sit on the VOD platform. And then when the rights actually clear the next day, then it's on there ready to be played back. So that we find that it's a very, very powerful tool for the very stressful situations that happen within the operations of a supply chain within our customers. And in today's world, people often need to either do these things by hand, which takes long and is very error prone, or build like very, very heavy supply chains that can be restarted manually from within. And that's a lot of effort, a lot of testing goes into that. So we wanted to make that easier and simpler as well. So that's why we are developing Rewind as part of the NextGen platform.
Really a clever way of handling exceptions or without having to write those exceptions into the complexity of a fully, architected supply chain.
Yeah, our customers today think about these exceptions and then they build like these helper supply chains that you
Right.
can run in the middle. But you only think so far, right? You always there's always this one case that you don't catch. And then when that happens, then that's the season finale of your biggest IP and all of management is looking. So that's when the high stressful situation come in. So here you don't need to think about all of these because you can just ad hoc rewind this without having to start coding and doing all of those things.
Yeah, yeah, very important. Okay, let's pivot a little bit and talk about AI and
Mhm.
specifically an agentic AI interface. You mentioned
Mhm.
that AI readiness is one of the core themes of NextGen Rally. What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So I mentioned that the supply chain that we actually store in the backend is not the graphical representation. It's a structured text file. It's a YAML file. It's structured text, and AI large language models love structured text. I mean, even when we started like a year ago building these things out with like co-pilots and so on turned on, it started to autocomplete things without us even teaching it because it's very, very good at structured text. So having that as the starting point in there makes it a very strong candidate to be placed within an agentic environment. But that's just half of it. I mean, it's a very, very big half of it because without this, the AI tools would have a much, much harder task ahead of them understanding and writing supply chains on the fly. But it also needs an interface to do so. So what we will be releasing first is an MCP server that allows you to get status information out of the system and then also allows you to essentially trigger supply chains and put these supply chains together on the fly. So if you need to, like I made the example earlier about sending a proxy to your remote office in APAC, what about an operator doesn't build that manually anymore? You essentially just say during an agentic interface, even an operator typing it in or even no operator involved, it's just there's an agent that says like we need to send it there, and that calls to another agent that then calls Rally and says, oh, there's no supply chain for this. I'll build one. I have a proxy generation. I have a check the rights. I have this. I have this, and off it goes. But that's just the first step of this MCP server, because no matter when you hear that this recording, it might be even if you hear it 2 days after we release it, it might already be a new thing that is out, right? So we have a lot of plans there to add harnesses on top of this, and even building agents within the system that are then specifically trained on, for example, finding things within the Rally system, because that's our expertise at that moment. And then the agent doesn't need to know how to do this. It talks with that agent. So there's a lot of skills and harnesses that we will be releasing on top of the MCP server, which is kind of like the first ground stepping stone for AI implementation. But even that on its own is already super powerful. The tests and demos we've done with the MCP server as we have, and the capable models out there right now are very, very impressive with what they can do, even the standard models that are not specifically trained on media supply chain.
Mm. So I guess one thing we should make clear for customers watching, do they need to adopt AI to benefit from NextGen Rally?
No, 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 no. All the benefits that we talked about, the simplicity, they care, they matter for humans as well. So absolutely, you don't need to use AI to run this, but we wanted to make it possible that you can, either in a co-pilot assist point of view or even in a hands-up agentic environment. We wanted that to be possible, but no, you can absolutely build these supply chains yourself. All the demos that we've built for the launch of this that we are showing customers, we built by hand, and that's totally fine. And I think that will be continued to be heavily used. Even what I said earlier, when it comes to this agentic environment, what you kind of want is you want to build the building blocks yourself, in my opinion, and test them and validate them so you have deterministic outcome, because it is your content that you're running through a supply chain. And once again, if it's the season finale of your biggest IP, you don't want the agent just to think about, oh, it's the right thing to downscale it to SD to save some storage space at the end of it, right? You want the delivery supply chain to be pre-baked and the agent just calling it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as part of this whole AI initiative, SDVI isn't building its own AI models, is it?
No. That's not the business we're in.
Yeah.
That is obviously everyone knows the big players there, and that's their business, and they're very good at it, and very big because of that. No. It's definitely in an agentic environment. It's bring your own agent and bring the model of your choice into Rally and have it interact with our MCP server. No, that would be a misguided effort if we would create our own models here. They would not be up to snuff with the rest of the world, and it would be a sidetrack, and we wouldn't be developing what we should develop, which is our expertise in this. And even if we bring our own agents within that environment, like I said, something that finds media based on metadata or something like this, we would also be using other big players' models to do so. In that case, we wouldn't be implementing our own either.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about impact. A lot of folks who are going to watch this video are going to be existing Rally customers, and for them, I want to make sure that we address the practical questions of what changes or what stays the same, as they think about moving forward with Rally.
I mean, obviously, I can't say nothing changes because it's the next gen, but nothing changes in the realm of how they currently run their operations. So this next gen actually sits essentially on top and builds on top of what Rally is currently. So when you run this and in the declarative supply chain, you essentially say like, I need to send this there, and one part of this is a proxy transcode you do with transcoder A. That transcode is still the same transcode that you run today. This core Rally job at the bottom is still the same Rally job. We're not like building the whole platform. There's a lot of code in there that we've spent a lot of time in to optimize the infrastructure management and all of that stuff. So we're not throwing that away. So with that, there's also no deprecation on how you currently build supply chains. The classic Rally supply chain sticks around. It's even a step further that we want to be able to customers that have put a lot of time and effort in building their supply chains over the last decade within the Rally system to be able to expand this and call those from the new supply chain building mythology. So you will be able to essentially call supply chain fragments, probably makes the most sense. You could call it a full supply chain as well from within the next gen environment. And with this leverage, for example, the logic that you've built for your multi audio proxy generation or something like this, you don't need to rebuild this. But if you want to use this from a new supply chain you want to build in next gen, just call that and run it from there. Because like I said in the beginning, it's an ever-changing environment. So I think in most cases, our customers will slowly migrate their top-level supply chains into the new world while keeping their fragments around and essentially making it look like these classic Rally supply chain parts that they're putting in, they look like a supply chain function to the top level, essentially at that point. So there's no need to switch or something. But we expect a lot of adoption because all of the benefits that we've talked about. So we want that to make that as easy and painless as possible as well. So get into the hands and then get your even departments that you're currently again not considering for a Rally supply chain, because once again they're not bubbling up high enough, so they are built. They get their automation built by the tech team. They can start building this and use the same Rally platform, use the same infrastructure, but essentially use the new system to build them.
Great. So let me close with one last question, Chris. Mm-hmm. If you had to say in a sentence or two why this matters to the industry, so not just our customers, but to the whole ecosystem, what would you say?
Again, similar to what I said in the beginning, we live in a ever-changing world, and supply chain requirements, may there be technical requirements, business requirements, strategic requirements, and then sprinkle AI on top of this. So you need to change a lot of things very quickly and on an ongoing basis. So you want a system that can keep pace with you, both from the setting it up and configuring it, but also from an execution layer, which is why we always had the execution layer that could keep pace with changing of demands, but now we also upgraded the configuration layer essentially to make that quicker to adapt as well.
Well, Chris, thank you. This is a significant time for SDVI and for all of our customers. I really appreciate you walking us through it.
No, it was a pleasure. Anytime.
And for all of you watching, if you want to go deeper on NextGen Rally, all the links are in the description. And if you're at a media company and you want to talk to us about your supply chain strategy, we would love to talk. So be sure to subscribe. You get more conversations like this one. Thanks for watching.